Hi there. Welcome to our continuing Hebrew class at the Fort Collins Bible Church Biblical Training Program. We are so glad you're here and you're pushing on, and I want you to know and remind you that it is such a delight, such a joy to be able to read God's Word in the original languages, in the original Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. And in today's world, with the technology and things that are available to us, it's not an impossible task for you. I'm not suggesting that by this class you're going to become a cutting-edge Hebrew scholar, and I think that's very important for us to be mindful of, because one of the huge problems with studying Bible languages is not actually the knowledge that you gain, it is the arrogance that some people gain with that little bit of knowledge. So, thinking that they can make extraordinary and amazing never seen before observations about the text or about the meaning based on just a little bit of Hebrew, as I think Bill Mounts said when confronted with, don't you think a little bit of knowledge of biblical Greek in that case is dangerous? He said, no, more knowledge is always good. A little arrogance is incredibly dangerous. So as we humbly continue on, we want to remind ourselves of our goals. Our goals are to grow closer to God's Word. Our goals are to see more clearly what the Word says. And it's really valuable that we notice this. As we study Hebrew and Greek, it's kind of like, and an old pastor of mine, Dick Berg, often used the illustration that when you read your English text, it's kind of like, watching a black and white television, right? You gotta, you're seeing the pictures that you need to see. The messages are coming across. It's a wonderful blessing. But when you can get into and break through that next level into the original texts and begin to see them, it's as if you're dialing in those clarity knobs and seeing things in color, whereas before you saw them in black and white. This is in no way to denigrate studying your language, English language translation. It's a wonderful gift of God, and God's Word can move to any language which God has created. So it's not suggesting that this is the only way to grow closer to the Lord, far from it, but it's a way to step a little bit closer to the original text which God gave to us by divine inspiration. So with that in mind, we are going to head into today's class. The other thing I want to remind you of, and we'll repeat several times, is that learning a language is not like learning systematic theology or math or certain, scientific endeavors, in that you're not just packing your head with more facts or learning more ideas. You're really learning basic building blocks of communication, which means that it's more akin to learning, say, a musical instrument or learning how to draw or paint beautifully. It can be done. There are people who have absolutely no affinity towards something, but even they can be improved in their ability to play music or a musical instrument or paint if they are exposed to the right techniques. And then what they have to do is practice that. I tell both my musical students as well as my language students the same thing, is that what it takes to learn a language is time. It just takes a lot of time. And that is why, in the context of this specific method that we're going through, we're not taking in a ton of information, because you need to take in small bites of information and assimilate them over time. This is not a seminary course, and therefore it is not expected that with a seminary course you might spend one, maybe two class lesson or class sessions on the alphabet, expecting to get that whole thing memorized within a week or less usually. And that is not the aim and purpose of the biblical training program. The biblical training program is aimed towards people who are living their life and just want to grow deeper with Christ at a moderate pace. So recognize that you've come into this, and this is a long haul investment. These 10 lessons meant to be done over 10 weeks, along with the exercises which you'll do in your Teach Yourself to Read Hebrew book by EKS Publishing, a wonderful book, will ultimately teach you to be comfortable pronouncing. We should probably say, we call it Read Hebrew, but it's really pronouncing phonetically Hebrew. And there's so much to learn beyond that, of course. In fact, that's really where everything starts. But I want to encourage you to just take these slow, small steps, and over time you will become more and more comfortable, more and more familiar, and more workable in, or able to work with the biblical Hebrew text. So with that, we'll move to our screen share, and we will remind you some of the Hebrew basics. We just can't hit this enough. This is Genesis 1:1, and we will note that it reads from right to left. So we read Hebrew from right to left rather than from left to right. So that means, laser pointer, that means that this reads this way. This way. So, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et. Okay, so it's going to read this way, and we saw it reads consonant down to a vowel, with some exceptions, consonant down to a vowel, consonant down to a no vowel there, consonant down, and so on and so forth. So, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et. So, you will be able to see, and we will be able to talk about this text a lot more, but we wanted to be very clear that that's how Hebrew reads. And once you get over that step, you've got a good movement. So we got those are the consonants we learned last time, and here is the vowel sounds we learned last time. We'll go over them right now. So this is our bet, and it makes a ba sound. B is in boy, but bet, and it's drawn like this. That little dot in the middle makes it a bait. We'll open that or learn more about that today. This is the sha sound, sha. So we note, and it's going to be important to us to remember because we're going to see these dots move and they make a difference. This dot here makes it a sha sound, okay? Sha in your shin. And it'll become a sin when the dot's over here, but don't worry about that just yet. We draw our shin this way, down, an overstroke, an upstroke, and a downstroke. So, and then your dot there. We also learned last week tav, and the tav is our T sound, T as in toy or table, and we draw our T sound here, here, and here, and we wanted to pay special note to this little tail here and the fact that this is absolutely closed, okay, and that there's no tail here. So we've got this, we'll see, that's kind of a resh shape, but worry about that later. Here's that, and out with a toe. Tav needs a toe. Make sure tav gets a toe. That's what makes him a tav. It's what differentiates him from other letters that we'll encounter soon. And we got to look at vowels. We got to look at the comets, and we saw that it was or chametz, that is a ah sound, ah, not eh, not ah, ah, ah. So we saw that's like looking at that little uvula, is it? A little dangly bit at the back of your throat. It's as if your mouth's open, ah, ah. And petach is in very subtle nuance difference, but we're going to pronounce it much the same. Patach, ah, ah. So we learned the comets and the patach, those vowel sounds, and we'll oftentimes put an X over those so that you can see. All right, so with that, we get to move on to a new letter, and that is your Alef. And your Alef is a silent letter. And there's going to be one other silent letter that we learn, and this is rather strange to us to have a letter that makes no sounding. There's been argument that maybe it did make some kind of guttural sound or some kind of sound in the past, but currently we do not regard it as a sounding letter. It is silent. And of course, one of the fun things about the Hebrew alphabet is that it is filled with all sort of, we might say, lore. There's stories that were written, some of them from a rather mystical belief that the Hebrew letter or Hebrew alphabet is magic, so much to the point that different Hebrew mystics, particularly throughout the Middle Ages, believed that by writing the right word in Hebrew and then putting it inside, a rock of stone or some stone or something or some container might make a golem, right? Because the word, the Hebrew, is so mystically, magically powerful. Of course, we don't buy into that now. But one such story is that Alef, in being chosen to be first, said with all humility, if I should be the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, then I will be silent in all humility. And so if that helps you remember, then great. But our Alef is a silent sound, and how that functions for us is that it enables us to put vowel sounds just below it or next to it, as we'll see, and you can get non-enunciated or non-consonantal vowel sounds. So it becomes very important for that, for being able to, and then as we'll see, the IN has the same. So we get two silent letters eventually that both don't get any pronunciation, but they can absolutely affect the meaning of the word. And since Hebrew is for us, biblical Hebrew that is for us read more than spoken, of course you can go learn modern Hebrew or Ivrit and see that many of these rules and these things still apply. Nevertheless, I'm not in any way proficient with Ivrit, so we're just talking about getting you into the basics of biblical Hebrew. So you see your Alef here, and how we're going to draw that Alef in simplest forms is like this. You're going to start with this downstroke, and then come in here with this stroke, and finally out with that stroke. So again, and you'll do a lot of practice on this stroke, that stroke. And you might wonder, why is it that I'm writing all these letters? They don't look as pretty as they do on the Hebrew page, as in the beautiful, ornate Hebrew texts that I hope you have found and seen, and just all the glories of Hebrew calligraphy is just magnificent. But the reason why we want you writing these letters again and again and again and writing your name out in Hebrew script is because it gives you another way to interact with these letters, to understand and connect to, and through your kind of the physical action and repetition of writing them to gain meaning. So as we learn to write all these letters correctly, I highly encourage you to write out your favorite Bible verses, your favorite Old Testament verses in Hebrew, just in any way you can interact with that. And additionally, as you learn to read more of these letters, and in these 10 lessons, you should be able to pronounce, is what I'm meaning by read here, pronounce any text in a Jewish prayer book, any text in the Bible. I'm not saying there's not going to be some queries or questions that you have, or some unusual pronunciations, but by and large, we're going to put you in a place to be able to read through that, and that's what I recommend you do. If you can get the Hebrew text on your phone, which is very easy to get for free through various Bible apps or online measures, just sit down and read and pronounce through some of these verses as best you can. There's also great screencasts by a number of people where they will read through the text and you can just follow along. And that's a great exercise in moving forward. So the next letter is actually not a new letter. Well, it kind of is, but not entirely. We've already learned about the bet, right? The bet makes that B as in boy sound. And we noticed that it has this swoop, a line, and a dot. Now we're going to see that dot tends to make things harder, right? So if we remove that dot, and you'll notice these are both two because they're considered the same letter, they're just with the two different pronunciations, which, by the way, we do that in English all the time, right? You've got the difference between cat, ocean, right? And there's probably a third. I can't think what the other one is. Anyway, Pacific Ocean, right? Pacific Ocean. You have three C's, all of which make a different phonetic sound. So we do that too. It's just not marked. So the Hebrew alphabet notes that this is a bet, B as in boy, and it's very natural to your mouth if you think about it. When you talk about bet, you bring your lips together for that explosive bet, bait, ba, 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 ba. And then when you move over to this vet, you're still vet. You're still kind of using similar movements. You're going to probably move towards putting your teeth on your tongue. Vet, bait. So bet, vet. So you've got this kind of idea here where you're moving between bet and vet. So when you see the dot, it's as if the dot brings your lips together. Bet. And without the dot, you're going to let a little air through, right? That's what that hole would do, is if you imagine that's coming out of your mouth. That goes from, we got to stop it, bet, to it's open now, so vet. We're going to constantly be moving air, right? So the bet, but sound actually stops the flow of air entirely for a very short period of time. But, and v has, as you're voicing the V sound, what we call the V sound, the vet sound, you notice you're letting air through. And we are going to draw vet just like, we're going to draw vet just like, just like we draw bet. So you got a cross line on top, a down line, a line that makes sure to have a tail over here, right? and this is the B, bet, and without that extra dot, you get a vet. Vet, bet, bet, vet, bet, vet, bet, vet, bet, vet. Don't forget it. Don't confuse the two, if at all possible. So our next letter is the Gimmel, and the Gimmel makes the G sound. Gimmel is a really pretty letter, I think, for some reason, and it's kind of got a tall. We might compare it to a Vav later, but it's got a tall section, and then it's got this, speaks out with this wonderful little tail here, and the Gimmel is the G sound. G is in girl. Never, and it's important that you know that we don't have the same syllabic or phonetic morphs that happen in English. So for G, when we think of a G, that could sound as girl or Gabby or Gimmel, or it could sound like gentle, right? It can morph that way. Hebrew does not share those same relationships, right? Our work with the G sound has to do with the history of English and how it came about to be written in the alphabet. But in Hebrew, it's just the G, right? You're only going to get G, so never try to impute Western or sounds from your alphabet or phonetic movements or modulation from your alphabet to the biblical Hebrew alphabet. Gimmel is a G sound. Gimmel, 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 and the Gimmel is written very simply with a little dash, a downward line, and another downward line. So it makes a little teepee almost, right? You got this lovely teepee. So you're going across, down, and then you pick up and go down this way, and you'll get your Gimmel sound. Girl, Gabby, given, Garmadon. Yes, Garmadon. So you got your Gimmel sound there. Next, you have a Dalet, and the Dalet is our D sound. D as in dog, as in dippy, as in do 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 do. Dalet is looks kind of like an open half door frame, right? So that's how I think of it. You got this. It looks a little bit like a door, which you only see part of. Use that, whatever imagery works for you. And you read a Dalet with a good long line and a line down. Nice simple draw. In fact, this is probably a little long on this side, but over here, down here, and you need to make sure you leave that little tail. That's what's going to keep it as a Dalet versus a Resh, or confusing it with other letters. So the thing about learning the Hebrew alphabet, as with anything, all of the importance is in the details. A slight stroke will change the meaning of a letter, and it gives us pause to remember what Jesus said in Matthew 5 about the law, that not one jot or tittle would be removed from the law, or would pass from the law. What did he mean? Well, he meant these strokes. The jot is the yod, that's the smallest letter. We'll look at that in time to come. But these little tails here make the difference between one letter and another. And again, we do it in English. There's only a few strokes between a C and a G. There's only a stroke between an O and a Q, and so on and so forth. So now you have learned our three new consonants for the day, even though one of them is not really new. So we're going to review them one more time, just because that's important, as we said. All right. So you are going to look at today Alef, Alef, and Alef is silent. Alef. And Beit and Vet's our new, bet and vet, vet is our new letter, or one in that series. And Gimmel. Now the book wisely tries to teaches us in the sense that of trying to just associate these with the sounds that they make, and that's good. I do think it's important to learn the names of the letters, and so we could argue that you can go back and do that later, but I'm going to keep saying them. But what I want you to focus on is what the book wants you to focus on, which is what sound do they make? How would I pronounce that when I encounter it? You don't want to, you want to know the names of the letters ultimately, but focus on learning how that sounds. So we do have one vowel today with two different ways of notating it. So we've talked about right, we had the patak, and now we're going to talk about the kirech on both sides. So that's this little dot, right? We got this little dot right here. And you say there's so many dots. Yeah, absolutely, right? Every language has its own individual ways of notating things, and this is the vowel system added by the Masoretes in the 10th century. Praise the Lord, they did. And this little dot means, and I should be working from right to left, I'm sorry, but this little dot makes the E sound. E, right? And so when you see this dot with the yod, we'll look at the yod, but it looks like an apostrophe. When you see the dot with the yod, you're going to see that that makes the E sound like in street. And if you see the singular dot, it's I as in igloo. So they oftentimes get pronounced or sound rather similar when you hear someone reading or speaking. And yet we're going to see this often where the yod will make it a little bit longer. Street, igloo. So a little bit more on the I side. So these are both kirech, and they are both dots. They're just dots. Isn't that great? Now, here is a full Hebrew alphabet chart, and you can search on Google and find this entire chart. It reads, again, right to left, and that what you've learned is Alef, Bet, Vet, Gimmel, Dalet. All right, that's what you've learned from the consonants. And then from the vowels, you've learned the komets, the petach. So the komets, petach, and then the komets katan, still don't worry about that distinction just yet. And as in igloo, and where's the other one? Oh, there we go. Kirech mole. So you know this much of your vowel sounds, which means you only have 6 or 7 more to go, depending on how you count them. And you know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your consonants, and we could even cheat and say you got a little introduction to yod, but that'll go far. Well, you are well on your way to learning to pronounce, to read through biblical Hebrew. If nothing else, if you only went through learning this alphabet, what it would do for you is enable you to use better commentary, better biblical resources, by being able to recognize the difference between one thing and another, if you like, one Hebrew word or another, and not have to look over to the transliteration, which can be helpful, but is more difficult to recognize. So learning the alphabet is a key step into learning your Hebrew vocabulary. And then even if you're just focusing on more word studies, you want to have a word study on achav, or a word study on shalom, or whatever it is, the well-known Hebrew words that you're familiar with, you'll be able to access more intense and in-depth resources. So God bless you. Keep going on this. You have, if you're taking this course for certificate, particularly for the Scholar Certificate, then go through the subsequent exercises. And if you're taking this online, then take pictures of the visual ones, take pictures of your handwriting for the ones you've written out, the exercise you have to write out, and then take audio files of your audios, and I'll listen to them because getting the correct pronunciation is important. You see, most languages struggle with or ask questions whether they're defined by their vowels or their consonants. Our English is more defined by its consonants, right? So one person can say banana, another will say banana, and those two accents, you say, well, you still think of that, that yellow fruit. In Hebrew, we're not going to play fast and loose. So you don't want to play fast and loose with either the consonants or the vowels, because they are consistent. You don't have vowels doing as many jumping jacks. So you want to drill those in. That's why we ask that you turn those in and make sure that we're getting double checks, so you're not drilling something in wrong, right? If you mistakenly pronounce your Gimmels as Gimmels, then you're going to wind up with a huge problem, because that's not the use of that letter. So God bless you in your studies, and I pray that you will succeed in your exercises, and we'll see you next time.